The new findings around the dangers of inflammation, have they coincided with the rise of turmeric?
Maybe, yeah. Inflammation is certainly a bit of a buzzword, and it is thought to be anti-inflammatory. So it could be that's why. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those traditional remedies, I think, which people do like the idea of. You know, it's been used for hundreds or thousands of years by traditional healers, and so, you know, we figure it sounds truthy, it sounds plausible that there's something beneficial in it because it's been used all that time.
And we're not putting it down, but the NBC investigation suggests that there's plenty of evidence in preclinical studies that may not translate to efficacy within the human body. What's your impression of how much we know about turmeric right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems like it's promising, and what you've said is probably right. There was a big review published last year, actually, which was in the Journal of Medicinal Chemistry, which concluded that there is no evidence curcumin has any specific therapeutic benefits, despite thousands of research papers and more than 120 clinical trials. So, but then if you look at the Cochrane review, which is a very good, kind of comprehensive review on all kinds of things, they classify turmeric as promising for some things, and one of them is peptic ulcers and ulcerative colitis, which it may be effective in treating, but they say, you know, larger trials are needed. And then there's a little bit of evidence around curcumin and cancer as well, but again, you know, it needs more. They haven't really figured out what it is, if anything, that turmeric or curcumin does. And so it's a tricky thing for them to study. And so it kind of points to that bigger issue, which is that there's no such thing as a superfood. You know, you have a super diet, not superfoods. And if you're eating one thing to protect you from cancer, it's pointless most of the time.
What about kale and blueberries?
It's false health economy. If you're having a turmeric latte and you think it's going to protect you from cancer, if you're still not eating vegetables and if you're still drinking alcohol, you know, it's like having a Diet Coke with your mega bacon burger. It's just false health economy.
A turmeric latte.
Do you think if you have too much of this stuff that you might go yellow or orange?
Your tongue definitely will. Yeah, and actually there was a report that I read of someone actually dying from having a turmeric infusion, like intravenous infusion.
Whoa.
Gosh, they don't tell you that on the advert.
No, so that was a cautionary tale, but that sounds like a very odd thing to be doing with it.
It does.
Yeah, most of the time. Have you seen the turmeric lattes, though? Because those are quite...
No, I thought you were joking about the turmeric latte.
No, it's a thing. It's a thing. Yeah, the turmeric latte, they're very popular in certain cafes.
On certain streets. So take it if you like, but the jury's still out in certain respects.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that there's potential benefit down the track, but they don't really know yet. So there's a lot of stuff that's been claimed, which is really not proven.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nikki. Nikki Besant on the panel. Before we go, just quickly, panellists, speaking of health, would you take alcohol out of supermarkets?
Yes.
You would. Supermarket owners, the biggest drug dealers in the country, says Alcohol Action New Zealand.
Yeah.
You
I was trying to think of the name of that very good young cabinet minister some years ago who put a cabinet paper up, got defeated and disappeared off the scene. Bring him back, that young man. I think his name was Simon.
It wasn't Bridges, was it?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
But he was at the same party, though.
You have the advantage of us there. All right. Michael Decker, thank you for coming on the panel today.
My pleasure.
And Susan Hornsby-Gallick, always nice to have your company too.
Thanks. See you next time.
See you next time, and thanks everybody for listening to us today. We're back tomorrow. Checkpoint with John Campbell coming right up.
The Official Information Act reveal 48% of EQC's unresolved claims in Christchurch are for botched repairs. And a Christchurch lawyer believes thousands of homes haven't been assessed or repaired properly, and some homeowners may not even know yet. Also tonight, free school uniforms and stationery and no school fees. We spent the day at an Auckland charter school fighting the ministry to stay open. The company that manages the forests above Maraho says it's devastated by the flash floods of huge logs that Cyclone Gita swept through the settlement. Sky TV slashes subscriptions to counter a slide in customers. And we're at Auckland's iconic King's Arms Tavern as it prepares to close.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Bat in Aho. The National Party says revelations about the government's Cornerstone Provincial Growth Fund are a train wreck. RNZ has revealed a waste-to-energy proposal is linked to a businessman who's subject to inquiries by the Serious Fraud Office. A major shareholder of Renew Energy, Gerard Gallagher, was referred to the SFO last year after an investigation into his time at the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority. The Regional Economic Development Minister, Shane Jones, has put the funding on ice while he investigates further. Party leader Simon Bridges says it's a mess.
I think it's train wreck, and I think him acknowledging that it's road cool shows that I'm right. I mean, the reality is what this shows in relation to this $350,000 is that the government takes taxpayers' money very, very lightly.
Simon Bridges, the government's hit back, saying the company received just under $50,000 while Mr Bridges was Economic Development Minister. Dozens of Pukerua Bay residents could have been drinking sewage-contaminated water for several hours. This morning, a contractor broke a wastewater and water main, potentially contaminating the water for 50 homes in the seaside community north of Wellington. Gary O'Mara of Wellington Water says the water was shut off immediately, but some could have remained in pipes for people to drink.
We're in the process of notifying 50-odd properties that are impacted along Pukerua Bay, Ocean View Road and Brendan Beach Road, not to use the water. That's the key message, do not use the water. And we are providing bottled water to those properties, and there'll be a tankard supply available in a couple of hours for the community to use.
Gary O'Meara says the water should be connected again by tomorrow morning, but residents will need to boil it for another 3 days. Anyone in the area who becomes or feels unwell should go to their doctor. A Maraho resident whose home was damaged by forestry runoff in last week's storm says the area should not be used for forestry again. Properties in the coastal settlement near the Abel Tasman National Park have been covered with debris from the recent forestry harvest brought down off the surrounding hills by the storm's heavy rain. Merv Hall, who lives in the Maraho Valley farm community, says residents were trapped by the deluge of water and logs, and it was a miracle no one was killed. He says the surrounding hills are not suited to commercial forestry.
What we need, the separation point granite hills around here, are never planted in forestry again. It is just not a sustainable activity in these areas.
Maraho resident Merv Hall. Devonport residents are worried about the contamination from a toxic banned foam. The New Zealand Defence Force will this week begin testing a tidal area at Ngātaringi Bay in the Auckland suburb. Information released to RNZ yesterday revealed banned foam substance previously used to fight fires had contaminated the nearby waters. The Auckland Council says it's been made aware of the contamination this morning and are awaiting further information before taking action. A human rights lawyer says a hearing shrouded in secrecy, which has begun in Wellington, probably involves issues of national security. The subject of the hearing is so secret it hasn't even been listed on the court's daily schedule. Security has also been beefed up at the High Court building and the media has been excluded from the hearing. Michael Bott says even in cases involving sexual offending against children, the media is allowed to sit in, but whether the details are suppressed is a separate issue.
One would hope that there are exceptionally good reasons for this, but as it stands, one has to be concerned that if the media are excluded, aren't even informed as to what's going on, and aren't even given the right to be heard, given the serious way the court traditionally regards the role of the fourth estate.
Michael Bott says the case is the sort of thing which happens in some of the world's worst totalitarian regimes. Auckland train staff are not yet ruling out a full strike, despite saying today's negotiations were productive. Staff are refusing to work overtime for the next 3 weeks over a long-running dispute between workers and the train-operated Transdev, which wants to do away with train managers in favour of a single driver. A union organiser from the Rail, Maritime and Transport Union, John Kerr, says the staff met Transdev and Auckland Transport today. Mr Kerr says the meeting was constructive and the parties are making headway. The groups will meet again on Monday. It's 5 minutes past 5. Sport, the New Zealand cricketers have crumbled to 179 for 8 after 43 overs, batting first in the second one-day international against England in Mount Maunganui. Well, England's fielding has been on song, affecting 3 run-outs, with Martin Guptill the top scorer for New Zealand, making 50. The Black Caps lead the 5-match series 1-0. The All Black halfback TJ Perenara says departing loose forward Jerome Kaino was an inspiration and mentor for young players arriving in the All Black environment. Kaino's confirmed he's heading to France at the end of the Blues Super Rugby season, though which club he'll join remains unclear. The veteran flanker has started all but 5 of his 81 tests, and Perenara says Kaino played a special role in his career.
He was awesome to be around, especially for me when I first came into the environment. He just makes sure he takes all the young boys under his wing and make sure he takes care of them. I'm from Porirua and Wellington, and he's from a similar area in Auckland, so he talked me through some of the stories that he had in his life and his journey through the All Blacks. It was quite warming and welcoming to have someone like that be able to confide in.
TJ Perenara. The Canberra Raiders National Rugby League coach and former international Ricky Stewart has blasted the timing of an historic mid-year test in the United States between New Zealand and England. Stewart has expressed concern about player welfare, saying promoters are running the scheduling to simply make money. He says every year league officials express concern about player welfare, but yet again players aren't being thought about. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Nick Tipping celebrates the jazz of Harold Arlen, while Kim Gertz wonders where the blue whales have gone. Perhaps they're taking this week's advice from Dexter Guff on self-promotion.
Cannonball naked into the pool. Just make an entrance in a sparkling gown into the dining room. Whatever it is, make a splash. Let people know that you are there and you are there to be reckoned with.
And at 10, we're live and we'll be keeping you up to date with the world, talking to some of the people who have made the news or who are just worth talking to. That's Lately with Karen Hay on Nights with Brian Crump on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Cloudy at times with a few showers turning to rain late tomorrow. Waikato to Manawatu, including Taupo, Taumaranui and Taihape. Areas of cloud, isolated showers possible this afternoon and again tomorrow afternoon and evening. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, partly cloudy. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Wairarapa, cloudy periods. Nelson, Bulla and Westland, rain easing to a few showers north of Hokitika tonight. Marlborough and Canterbury, scattered rain clearing this evening, then mainly fine, but areas of cloud about the coast. A few spots of rain developing late tomorrow. Otago and Southland fine at first, but scattered light rain from this evening. For Fiordland, rain developing this afternoon, and the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. It's coming up to 5:08, and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks very much indeed, Katrina. Hi everyone. We begin tonight with the growing number of earthquake re-repairs in Christchurch. Last night, Checkpoint producer Michelle Cook received an answer to an Official Information Act request on the number of unresolved EQC claims in our second largest city. This is 7 years after the major earthquake, which is why we asked. 48% of unresolved claims, that's 1,273 properties in total, are for re-repairs. And EQC has also told us that during 2017 they received 8,356 callback requests for remedial damage. The unresolved claims for re-repairs means work has been done. EQC, using public money, has gone into damaged homes, done assessments and repair work. But that work was either unsatisfactory, disputed, incomplete or had missed damage, often to foundations. And that means EQC now has to go back, in some cases 7 years on, to do much more significant work than was originally done. And a lawyer representing Christchurch homeowners told Checkpoint today the figure EQC gave us is just the tip of the iceberg.
Look, I don't want to be alarmist, but I think there's probably thousands of homes in Christchurch that haven't been assessed properly or repaired properly.
That's Peter Woods from law firm Anthony Harper, who's acting for homeowners claiming the EQC repairs they received and in many cases believed were complete weren't up to scratch.
Yes, we will have represented over 200 and I'm getting 1 to 2 calls a day at the moment.
7 years and 6 days after the most damaging earthquake, Peter Woods is getting 1 or 2 calls a day. And what are those calls saying?
The classic situation is they say, look, I'm concerned that EQC didn't assess the earthquake damage to our property properly, and when the Fletcher EQR people turned up to repair it, they didn't repair it properly either.
Yeah, they glued up the outside of the foundations with some glue.
That's Jacqueline Tither, whose home was repaired by Fletcher's for EQC in 2011. You have had some cosmetic work done.
I have.
As so many people have in Canterbury. And for many, that will be the end of the story. But for others, an unknown number, but growing, cosmetic wasn't enough.
I think that EQC was not assessing and repairing to the correct standards.
And like many of the people we've spoken to, the problems appear to arise from the initial assessments or scopes.
The assessments were done by unqualified people to the wrong standards.
That's obviously not true in all cases. Many people are settled fully and finally and have moved on. But Peter Woods, the lawyer we began with, who said,
there's probably thousands of homes in Christchurch that haven't been assessed properly or repaired properly.
Believes we don't yet know how many people are in that position because many of them don't yet know themselves. They're the people who are contacting him now, 7 years on, at the rate we discussed before. 1 to 2 a day.
Yes.
And it is...
and I should say we're not advertising for that. It's just a greater awareness of the extent of the problem.
7 years after the major February quake.
That's right.
Do you see recurring features? When people call you, what is the thing they're most likely to identify as needing re-repair?
The big issue is the foundations.
Which was Jacqueline's problem.
Yeah, they glued up the outside of the foundations with some glue and put some concrete over them and painted over them, but basically the December quake reopened those cracks in exactly the same places. I've got photos of before taken by EQC and then photos of after. Same spots, so it was really cosmetic.
In other words, the repairs satisfied the uneducated eye but weren't structurally complete.
Post-2011, the house was shaken around pretty badly and EQC came and did their inspections.
This is David Townsend, who knew nothing about earthquakes and damage and deferred to EQC's expertise.
So they came in and Fletcher's had a contractor, happened to be a painting and decorating company, come in and do the repairs to the house.
He thought things had been sorted. It looked like they had.
When I looked into it further, they had never assessed or even looked at structural damage.
So David Townsend hired his own engineers to assess the structural damage and went back to EQC.
They pulled their act together and they got a good team in front of me and said, well, OK, we do agree that we missed this. We do agree that we have repaired it cosmetically and not structurally. And they wouldn't put that in writing, but what they did certainly admitted that they accepted the damage in 2016.
Victory. But because the initial scope had identified cosmetic repairs costing less than $100,000...
The long and the short of it is they then said, well, OK, your claim's over cap now. And this is back in now July last year, 2017. And they've thrown it on to Southern Response.
David Townsend drove the process himself. The floor wasn't level. It had been level before the earthquakes. But Peter Woods says the people contacting him often find out through a third party.
Particularly when they come in to sell their house and, you know, there's a pre-purchase inspection and that inspection report says, well, the foundations are stuffed. And the homeowner says, well, hold on, that's supposed to be fixed by EQC, and then it gets them into a investigation as to what has gone on.
And the difference between what was repaired and what needed to be repaired, well, sometimes it's striking.
I could give you an example of a case we settled yesterday. Originally, EQC assessed the damage and they did about $50,000 worth of repairs to the house, mainly cosmetic. Well, in fact, all cosmetic, as it turns out. We got that over cap last year, and the insurer has paid out on a full replacement basis for a new house.
How much money are we talking about?
$600,000.
And the original was?
50.
How many such cases are there? No one knows. EQC's response to our Official Information Act request states there are 1,273 claims before them for re-repairs. But in the same response, the Earthquake Commission tells us,
as EQC settlements are not full and final, we continue to receive callback requests for remedial damage. During 2017, we received 8,356 requests.
Some of this work is so major it does seem bewildering that it's only happening now. Michelle also had cosmetic work done under EQC. Like David, she's now found herself being transferred from EQC to Southern Response. And the work her home needs?
The lift of our house, what's called a high lift, it will be lifted 3 metres in the air while they start from scratch, dig right down underneath, remediate the land as best they can, rebuild the entire foundation, including foundation ring and piles, and basically start again.
Peter Woods, as you heard earlier, fears there are thousands of cases where work hasn't been done or was done inadequately. And like Michelle's, the claims he's handling aren't small.
So far, I think all of the claims we've put to EQC for reassessment have ended up going over cap.
All of them?
All of them.
And remember, Peter Woods is getting 1 or 2 new cases a day.
Oh, it's a systemic problem. That I'm a very strong supporter of an inquiry into EQC. We need to know why this has gone so badly wrong and make sure it can't happen again.
It's lawyer Peter Woods. Now, we approached EQC for a response. They referred us to their relatively new minister who's been making changes at the top of the organisation, of course. The minister today appointed former high-ranking Labour MP Dame Annette King, former Cabinet Minister, of course, as interim chairperson of the Earthquake Commission, following the resignation of Sir Martin Weavers on Friday. We covered that on Friday on Checkpoint. Minister Woods will join us herself after 6 tonight. We also approached Fletcher's for comment. It has yet to respond. We really would love to hear from them, and we think it is in the public interest for them to front. And Checkpoint invited Jerry Brownlee to discuss the matters that originated on his watch as Earthquake Minister and Minister for EQC. Of course, he was the politician who oversaw this for the longest period of time. Jerry Brownlee has not appeared on Checkpoint once in the past 2 years to discuss the situation in Christchurch. He turns us down every time. He did appear on election night to discuss the election result. Today, well, our producer Bridget Burke voiced up his response.
My experience of interviews with Mr Campbell is that he spends most of the time allocated offering his opinions and cutting in over attempts to answer his questions. His advocacy style has led me to believe that all his interviews, particularly on this matter, are designed to affirm his position rather than elicit factual information. I hold no hope that any engagement with Mr Campbell would allow fair analysis of the remaining 0.6% EQC claims, which includes remedial claims. Better then to put up with his complaining about my non-appearance.
That was a verbatim statement from Jerry Brownlee, read by Bridget Burke. We also asked new National Leader Simon Bridges for an interview. He was on the program last night, but he declined to reappear to discuss all of this tonight. 18 minutes past 5. The Real Estate Authority has opened an investigation into struck off real estate agent Aaron Drever's involvement in the sale of an Auckland bowling green following Zach Fleming's Checkpoint investigation here on Monday night. Aaron Drever was struck off as a real estate agent in November 2016 after 9 findings of misconduct. But 5 weeks later, he sold an Avondale Bowling Club green to a company owned by his aunt for $300,000, less than half its market value. And immediately, in fact, the same day, it was flipped for $825,000. That's an increase of $525,000. Nobody involved in the sale, Aaron Drever, his ex-girlfriend and former club secretary Rachel Benge, club president Pat Bell, or lawyer Bruce Johnson, will comment about where that money has gone. We'll keep you updated with the authorities' investigations when we hear more. All of that in response to Zach's story here on Monday night. Another story that we've been covering. The company that manages the forests above Maraho says it's devastated by the flash flood of huge logs that Cyclone Gita swept through the settlement and is now reviewing if it can replant some areas. Maraho, the southern gateway to the Abel Tasman National Park, top of the South Island of course, was hit by an avalanche of forestry debris brought down by the newly harvested steep slopes, by the heaviest rain anyone had seen for a long time in the region. Locals say it was a miracle no one was killed by the debris. Our Nelson reporter, Tracy Neal, has been in Maraho, and Tracy filed this report.
A week on and the mud in Maraho is beginning to stink. A gang of trainee rangers from the Nelson Marlborough Institute of Technology is busy shovelling silt and debris from a long driveway. Tutor Jeff Button says they're volunteering their time to literally dig residents out of the mud.
We're presently standing on an access road which looks okay on the surface, but so we're digging trenches down the side so the water can drain off and get rid of the water, because in this muddy environment, cars are going to get stuck, and that can really impact on their businesses too. So,
student Christiane Ellery says the job is tough and not just physically.
Yeah, it's quite devastating really, because on our placement we were placed in the Able Tasman, and I mean that place has seen a bit of damage as well. All over the area, really. Yeah.
A nearby homeowner is too distraught to speak. He's just been meeting with an insurer who says some locals are facing large repair bills. Along the road at Old MacDonald's Farm and Holiday Park, chickens happily explore their new mud floor while staff clear out flood-damaged amenity blocks. Phil Reid is helping out, even though a great tide of boulders and trees smashed past his home in nearby Sandy Bay.
My God, it's the silt and mud, and of course you can't do anything with it until it dries out, because it's just like just like chocolate sauce, only smellier. It's been a big effort from a whole lot of the community, family, friends, even some of the batch owners at the front beach just arrived with shovels. It's been incredible.
Just 5 minutes down the road, tourists are packing out the cafes and booking kayak trips into the Able Tasman National Park. But further inland, the boats are hull deep in mud. A tsunami of debris swept down the hills and creeks of the Maraho Valley. For Merv Hall, who lives at the Maraho Valley farm community, a sanctuary he sought after the Christchurch earthquakes, the sight of a digger chewing through the bamboo around his home is almost too much.
All very sad.
At the height of the storm, Merv Hall says those living on the patch of iwi-owned land they call paradise were at the mercy of torrents of logs, water and mud. And while there was no way out then, many have since fled. We walk up a stream which last week was a violent river.
So this would have been an absolutely raging torrent where we're walking now?
Up here. When the tidal waves came through, the log jams would release and we get these waves of water. They would have been 6-7 metres high, 8 metres high. And you can see the size of that log there, fully grown pine tree, coming down the small one, and there are hundreds of them.
Mr Hall says the community hasn't yet tallied up the scale of the damage, the worst in the farm's 46 years. We walk to a quiet spot that escaped the deluge.
This area in here is a native bush which is covenanted, never been milled or touched, and what both ourselves and Wakatu treasure this piece of land. We really love it. But we're under threat from the milling of the forestry above.
Mr Hall says change has to happen.
What we need, the separation point granite hills around here are never planted in forestry again. It is just not a sustainable activity in these areas.
Tasman Forest Management manages the Maraho plantations on behalf of a combination of owners, including a Chinese state-owned entity and local iwi. Director Craig McMicken says it's a disaster, and while they had operated by the book, unprecedented rain from the cyclone last week caught them out.
We've had a number of mid-slope failures which have caused debris flows, and some of those have impacted on some of the neighbouring properties. It's a combination of logging slash, debris, there's some standing trees which have come down in slips.
He says the company has brought in heavy machinery to help clean debris from at least 9 properties. Mr McMicken says it's forced a rethink about their planting plans.
The plan for that area is for it to be replanted, but we are assessing areas which aren't suitable for replanting. The impacts of the storm will mean that we have another review of that.
The Deputy Mayor of the Tasman District, Tim King, says new environmental standards for plantation forestry that come into effect in May will force better practice. The new regulations include new tools for managing the environmental impacts from forestry, including erosion issues. But Tim King says they may not go far enough.
There are going to be tougher rules around a number of things. However, I wouldn't think that even those rules and these sort of events are going to prevent some of the damage that's been created.
Public meetings on the recovery effort are to be held in Riwaka and Maraho this evening. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi ko Tracy Neal Deney.
Funding for a regional project in Bulla has been put on ice after RNZ revealed the company is linked to a businessman subject to inquiries by the Ceres Ford office. Renew Energy is proposing to build a waste-to-energy plant on the west coast. One of its major shareholders, Gerard Gallagher, was found to have abused his position at the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority, CERA, for personal gain last year and was referred to the SFO. He's still connected to Renew Energy, set to receive $350,000 from the fund, overseen by the Regional Economic Development Minister Shane Jones, of course. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Officials from New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment and the State Services Commission were summoned to the Beehive this morning for a please explain. Shane Jones says he relies on officials to do due diligence.
But I'm not from the school of thought that wants to boot officials until I know what the facts are. But there's inevitably in this sort of stuff, there's a bit of political rubbernecking. But I don't think it's a train wreck. If anything, it's a mild form of roadkill. And if it's a hedgehog, well, we're going to strike a few pricks on my journey.
Some hours later, he told reporters the funding is on hold until he can be sure the project is fit to receive taxpayer dollars.
So MB officials have gone away. Obviously, I've reflected to them that there is a character test that they should be thinking about when various applications come forward. They've apologised that they didn't make me aware of this chap. Until the officials can assuage me, it's essentially on ice.
Shane Jones also revealed money had been paid to the company under the new National Party leader Simon Bridges when he was a minister in the previous government.
Well, the difficulty I've got is that money has already changed hands. Up to $50,000 has already been paid to this group, and it was paid by Simon Bridges when he was the Minister of Economic Development.
Mr Bridges, however, says it's the government's mess to clean up.
I think it's train wreck, and I think him acknowledging that it's roadkill shows that I'm right. I mean, the reality is what this shows in relation to this $350,000 is that the government takes taxpayers' money very, very lightly. Frankly, this is incompetent. You've got a situation where somewhere, somehow, whether officials or ministers, they did not make the appropriate checks.
Simon Bridges pursued the issue in the House, asking Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern if she was aware of the conflict of interest investigation.
That RNZ is reporting this morning, one is still under serious fraud investigation.
Mr Speaker, as I mentioned, those investigations were underway at the time that NZTE also engaged with this group, so it's fair to say that probably it was unknown, but that would be a question ultimately for the Minister and MB who were involved in that process.
The National MP Jerry Brownlee then took over with this question to the Minister, Shane Jones.
Does the Minister have confidence in the capability of his officials to access proper credentials of applicants against their ability to deliver on projects funded from his $1 billion Provincial Growth Fund? And can he point to one commercial venture in the world similar to the one proposed for Westport? Speaker.
Many questions tied up there. Obviously, we have a governance structure that I have absolute confidence in. But I have to say, April 2017, money was paid by the last regime to the company, not local government.
Papers provided to the Prime Minister from New Zealand Trade and Enterprise show there were payments of $21,000 in March last year, then a second of $24,000 in April for a feasibility study. The money was paid to the company run and owned by Gerard Gallagher. The day the second lot of money was approved was the same day Mr Gallagher was referred to the SFO. That was about 3 months after the State Services Commission had publicly confirmed it was investigating him for a conflict of interest. Simon Bridges says payments of that size would not have come across his desk as Economic Development Minister, and that they were for work done in 2016. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. Coming up, free school uniforms, stationery and fees. We spend the day at an Auckland charter school as it fights the Ministry of Education to stay open. The Australian government orders its largest ever compulsory product recall, and we're at Auckland's iconic King's Arms Tavern. If you love music and you have lived in the city for any length of time, then there's a good chance you will have been to the King's. It's preparing to close its doors tonight for the last time after almost 150 years. Remarkable. Have you been there, KB?
No.
Haven't you?
No.
Music lover like yourself?
No.
Just the funny little indie bands I like, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's the issue.
Right, OK. Anyway, we'll be there later on for funny little indie band lovers. We'd love your feedback. Don't forget, you can text us 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook, Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Lots of businesses coming up, including Sky TV, trying to stay in their game. But before it all, here's Katrina.
The government's Cornerstone Provincial Growth Fund has been criticised as a train wreck. RNZ has revealed a waste-to-energy proposal is linked to a businessman who's subject to serious fraud office inquiries. The Regional Economic Development Minister, Shane Jones, has put the funding on ice while he investigates further. The National Party leader, Simon Bridges, says it shows the government takes taxpayers' money lightly. Residents in Pukerua Bay may have been drinking sewage-contaminated water caused by a broken wastewater and water main today. Gary O'Meara of Wellington Water says the water was shut off immediately but could have remained in pipes for people to drink. Bottled water and a water tanker are being provided, and the water supply to the area will be reconnected by tomorrow morning. He says people should boil water for the next 3 days. A Maraho resident whose home was damaged in last week's storm by debris from a nearby forest says the area should not be used for forestry again. Properties in the coastal settlement near the Abel Tasman National Park have been covered with debris from the recent forest harvest driven off the hills in Cyclone Gita's heavy rain. Merv Hall says it's a miracle no one was killed. He says forestry is not sustainable in the area. Devonport residents are worried about the contamination from a toxic banned foam. The New Zealand Defence Force will this week begin testing a tidal area at Ngataringi Bay in the Auckland suburb. Information released to RNZ yesterday revealed banned foam substance previously used to fight fires had contaminated the nearby waters. The Auckland Council says it's awaiting further information before taking action. Auckland Train staff says today's negotiations were productive, but they're still not ruling out a full strike. Staff are refusing to work overtime for the next 3 weeks over a long-running dispute with the train operator, which wants to do away with train managers. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thanks so much, Katrina. Lots of business tonight. We're going to start with Sky Television. It's cutting prices in its cheapest plans to try and counter a slide in subscribers. The company shed more than 37,000 subscribers in the second half of last year, as people gave up their Sky decoder and sought out cheaper entertainment options online. What's Netflix, $11 a month or something? But analysts doubt dropping prices will work. Our economics correspondent Patrick O'Mara reports.
Sky TV's 6-month profit rose 12% to nearly $67 million due to lower costs. But that stronger result failed to hide the fact that the pay TV operator is continuing to hemorrhage subscribers, which have fallen to 779,000. 10% below its peak of 4 years ago. Sky's boss, John Follett, is not panicking, saying the company still offers plenty of basic fare that people love to watch.
Keep in mind, 70% of the viewing we get is from those linear channels, UK TV and BBC World Service and Discovery and those sorts of things. And so that's still a pretty good draw.
But cheaper online rivals such as Netflix and Lightbox are nipping hard at Sky's heels. The pay TV operator has tinkered in the past to try and counter the competition with little success. Sky's new response is to offer 2 basic packages at roughly $25 a month each, half the current $50 basic deal. While sports and movie fans will pay the same to add on extra channels, it means the overall bill will be up to $25 lighter. Sky's John Follett says he's not aiming to shore up the company's shrinking customer base.
We think there's a segment of out there in New Zealand that, with monthly payments on houses and that sort of stuff, that buying through a big basic to get to sports or movie may be a bridge too far.
On the streets of Auckland, people had a mixed reaction.
Here, anything that's cheaper is good. Be good for my dad, because that's why we have Sky. My dad, my mom, they watch Sky, and then me and my brothers and stuff like on Netflix, so that's why we're both.
No, I don't have Sky TV. I don't even have a connection to the Freeview or anything. It's just online. Yeah.
So you'd never consider signing up to Sky TV?
Not now. I don't. Maybe like 10 years ago. It's not. I think it needs to get with the times, to be honest.
Yeah, got sports but no movies.
But would you ever consider getting Sky Movies, for example?
No.
Why not?
Don't need to. Not with Netflix and Lightbox and all of those.
Movies, I go out and watch. I'm not a TV person.
So would you ever subscribe to something like this?
Yeah, if I have a family, I would recommend them to subscribe. But right now I'm here alone, so I'm not into it.
Do you have Sky Sports and Sky Movies?
Yeah.
Both?
Everything, yeah. If they bring it down, it'll be good.
Certainly sports fans are getting a better deal, which may persuade some to sign up and wavering customers to stay. But the technology commentator Peter Griffin doubts Sky has done enough to arrest the slide, arguing streaming is what households want.
It's a sort of a fortress mentality. They've got this cash cow. It's still a profitable business if they cut their costs, and they're going to ride that as long as they can. But ultimately, consumers are asking for more.
Analysts point out significant price cuts by Foxtel in Australia has done little to stem an exodus of subscribers. And with Netflix promising to spend $11 billion on content this year and have 700 original shows and movies by next year, Mr Griffin warns Sky can't be complacent. Yet he says the reality is New Zealand needs a strong local pay TV operator to ensure someone invests in local content, which Sky has done.
The worst case scenario really is if we see a Netflix just become so dominant in the international content space that it can have the market's power of a Google or a Facebook, buys up all the programming, and then delivers that to New Zealand from the US with very little investment in the local scene here. That's a major loss for consumers.
Meanwhile, investors are fretting about Sky's plans, not least since the company is cutting its dividend payout. Its shares fell about 7% in trading today. For Checkpoint, Patrick O'Mara.
Thanks, Patrick. Let's look at the rest of the day's business news, including the markets that Sky fell 7% on. Jonathan Mitchell beaming in from Wellington. Hi, Jono. Lovely. Whoops, so Daisy beaming back, and you've re-beamed. It's lovely to have you with us in that magnificent shirt.
Thank you, John.
Another busy day today. The business outlook too, improving slightly.
That's right. This is an ANZ survey looking at the business outlook. There's still a level of pessimism out there, John, and at 19% pessimistic, but doing a lot better than December when there was a net 40%. I guess companies have been unsure about the economic outlook given the policy changes of the new government. On top of that, the economy is sort of being moved now by terms of trade, so things like construction and migration have sort of been put to one side. But I spoke with ANZ's Chief Economist Sharon Zollner earlier today. Here's what she had to say.
We are hearing stories around the traps that perhaps businesses have become a little less alarmed about the change of government. Certainly this government's been working pretty hard to convince businesses that they are listening to them and consulting. So I think that might be a part of it. It's not unusual for politics to push around measured business confidence. We saw firms' estimate of their own activity hold up quite a lot better. It stayed in the black at least, but it also is below its historical averages, suggesting that it isn't quite all guns blazing at this point.
So how would you describe this survey? Businesses are, becoming more upbeat?
More upbeat, but I wouldn't call them upbeat as such, in that business confidence and the key own activity measure are both below their historical averages. So certainly improving, and hopefully that will continue as we go along. But and certainly from talking to firms around the country, they do appear to be getting on with things in terms of employing staff and investing.
It's Sharon Zollner from ANZ Bank. What else did the survey show, Jono?
Well, it shows the economy is probably going to grow around 2 or 3% this year. As Sharon Zollner pointed out, employment intentions and investment intentions have risen. But if we look at inflation, those expectations have fallen. That's unlikely to move the Reserve Bank, though likely to stay on hold with its official cash rate all year.
Right, we've already covered the Sky TV result, which was fascinating. It's going to be interesting to see what they do. Other numbers came across your desk today too, right?
Yeah, New Zealand refining was an interesting one. They managed to navigate the pipeline leak last year with an improved profit. It was just over $78 million. That was off the back of higher margins. As well, TradeMe, the advertising website TradeMe, it was a fairly flat profit for them, around last year's $46 million. That was despite strong growth in its classifieds business. It's expecting its full year revenue to match last year's.
And what else happened on the markets today?
We ended up 13 points to trade at 8,374 and $1.72.3 US cents and 92.8 Australian.
Jonathan Mitchell, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to the weather now with Met Service meteorologist John Law. Kia ora, John.
Kia ora. Rather a cloudy and humid feel today across those northern parts of the country, and we have got a few showers to watch out for as we go through the day from the likes of Auckland. Highs though still around about 25 degrees Celsius, but it is still another very warm night. 19 degrees Celsius to kick things off, 20 for those minimum temperatures up in the far north. More cloud though and a few showers as we head it through in towards the afternoon. But we are going to find it's still pretty mild by the night, and those humid temperatures are with us, even down in towards Wellington as well. Our minimum temperatures to start the day first thing on Thursday, 17 in Wellington, just a little bit more cloud through the afternoon, highs back to about 23. Down the eastern side of the North Line, and in fact for most of us south of, say, Taranaki, it looks to be a pretty decent day. A bit more cloud though through the afternoon, daytime highs back to around about 27 on that eastern coast. As we head down on towards the South Island, the best spot to be, likes of, say, Christchurch. A bit more cloud through the morning time, that should clear off, and highs back to about 25 degrees Celsius. There's more cloud, though, on the western coast, and some wetter weather arriving through the daytime, and even a few showers making their way across in towards the south, the Southland, and across in towards Otago. Temperatures there, though, back to around about 23 degrees Celsius for Dunedin. And that's it from me.
Thank you very much indeed, John. Associate Education Minister Kelvin Davis came under fire earlier this month after an Auckland charter school accused him of favouritism. 11 schools are currently fighting to stay open after the new minister, Chris Hipkins, signalled a plan to ditch the charter school model. Each has a deadline of April 1st, so what's that, a month away, to show they can transition, or they will be closed or integrated into the state system. The Villa Education Trust, which sponsors 2 charter schools in Auckland, lodged a formal complaint with the Ministry of Education about Mr Davis's visits to another charter school in his electorate, the Te Kapehu Whetū. It said Mr Davis had close personal ties to the Whangarei school and his visit was a conflict of interest. Checkpoint wanted to spend the day at Te Kapehu Whetū to see what a day is like at a charter school. We were all set to go when our visit was cancelled. Like that. But the Villa Education Trust's South Auckland Middle School was keen to host us. So we went to have a look. Our reporter John Boynton and our cameraman Nick Monroe with a day at the South Auckland Middle School.
How would you describe or define or give a meaning for a moment?
South Auckland Middle School Principal Wendy Gregg is in her element, teaching English in front of a class of 15 Year 8 students. The class is reading the book The Human Circus, and she's asking them about what a moment in time means to them.
We all have moments like this.
But this school is dealing with its own moment in its short history, a fight to secure its future. It's a fight it's not facing alone. 10 other charter schools around the country are also facing uncertainty after the government announced they would have their contracts terminated. Wendy Gregg says she's not worried.
I don't believe they've said that there'll be a termination of contract per se. I think there will be negotiation and transition, and I believe that our school speaks for itself and our community speaks for itself, and that will have a really positive outcome.
South Auckland Middle School is run by the Villa Education Trust, which runs 2 other middle schools in Auckland. It leases buildings inside the well-manicured grounds of the Elim Church facility at Manurewa, a reflection of its Christian leanings. The school has no infrastructure, instead relying on community facilities like the local park, pool and recreation centre. Alan Paul is the academic advisor for the Villa Education Trust and allowed Checkpoint inside for the day. The school day starts at 8:30 in the morning and finishes at 3:15 in the afternoon.
We have 15 children in our classes.
We split the day and have an academic morning, which has 3 of their core classes plus an independent time where they work on project work and output skills that's set for them. We have an arts, music, sport and community learning based afternoon, and we work in villas of 60, so each villa is year 7, 8, 9 and 10.
Wait right there. If you call right now, not 1, but 2 bricks, 50% off.
Yeah. Students are making an ad selling a brick, a test of their use of persuasive language. Standing in front of an iPad camera, Year 8 student Solomon is taking centre stage, ready for his moment in the spotlight.
I want to be in the entertainment company, be like a famous as YouTuber, or maybe become a great New Zealand actor. Yeah, just make my family proud.
Former Otago Highlanders lock Filippo Levi has swapped the rugby paddock for the school's hallways in his role as community officer. He acts as the go-between for students, their families and the school.
A lot of them will come from the local area, so pretty much from the Ministerial, South Auckland area, so probably over 90% are Māori and Pacifica. So the backgrounds, vary, so obviously a lot of them will have a lot of the mothers who are trying to raise a lot of their children, but they've probably got one parent that's working.
And his biggest job is making sure students turn up to school ready to learn.
We have the year 7s at the moment, so we have Takata year 7. So see, it's got all ticks there.
So that's a colour you like, the green?
That's a colour I like the colour. I like the greens, yep, green, and it's got P for present. So pretty much everyone's here, 100% attendance.
For one lesson, students are testing model airplanes they've made for a physics class. It's a hands-on learning experience the students seem to embrace.
We're learning about forces, like lift, thrust, and how the plane moves and different energies.
Year 9 student Jessica says the school provides an even playing field for students.
Because other schools you'd have to be either really good at sports or really good in learning, you have to get scholarships. Schools like these provide students like us free education, so it's very good.
In graphics class, students have just finished learning about vanishing points. Jasmine is in her first year at the school, meaning she's only been here a few weeks.
I feel a lot more safer here and everything. I feel like I have more friends in that, and it feels a lot easier because in my old school I had lots of people in my class, and in this class there's only 15, so I feel like the teacher gets more time with me to help me with my work. It feels like my family, my whānau here.
Alwyn Paul has fiercely defended the funding model and quality of charter schools.
Our policy is that our teachers are registered and qualified. We teach the New Zealand curriculum.
The school receives bulk funding, he says, which works out to around $10,000 per student a year. The school pays for the students' stationery and uniform, and there are no school fees. Alwyn Paul wants to be able to sing the same tune as a government. He says the Minister of Education, Chris Hipkins, visited the school last year when he was in opposition.
He asked a really insightful question, which was, okay, so you're really good now, this is a good school. How do you know, what are you going to do about being good in 5 years' time? The irony of that question is it now really depends on him.
Mr Paul feels the school is being backed into a corner by the Labour-led government.
We're in a really difficult situation that effectively the government is, trying to bully us into.
In its last Education Review Office report, Year 7 and 8 students were achieving at 72% at and above the old national standards in reading, 73% in writing and 70% in maths. Wendy Gregg says she's seen the huge changes students make at the school.
Coming to school for a start, wanting to come to school, wanting to learn, believing in themselves, going out into further schools and doing really, really well. More parent engagement in the school, in their education.
And she has full confidence in the path the school is taking.
I fully believed in the middle school model that we're running. Knew it would work, and it has. I knew there'd be some big challenges along the way and perhaps some criticism we might have to face.
The school has been given an April the 1st deadline to transition to become a designated character school. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei ko John Boynton ahau.
10.5 minutes to 6. The Hurunui District Council says there is nothing more it could have done to prevent a fire that nearby residents have been warning about for 2 years. A pile of 500 tyres was deliberately set alight on Monday evening, with 19 fire crews battling through the night to stop the flames from reaching a much larger pile of 600,000 tyres just 50 metres away. As Conan Young reports, the risk of such a fire was identified by the local council at least 6 months ago without any action being taken to reduce it.
North Canterbury Principal Rural Fire Officer Bruce Janes says his crews dodged a bullet with the tyre fire. He's thankful the wind didn't blow the toxic smoke over the top of the town of Amberley, just 2 kilometres away.
It's the worst sort of fire. It's like an oil spill at sea. It's your worst possible nightmare. You've got toxic smoke. You can't easily put it out. It just burns and burns and burns. And then on top of that, add anything you do is going to take toxic chemical down into the soil and affect, groundwater.
This wasn't the first fire to come close to the massive tyre dump. About a year ago, another blaze came close to setting it alight. Last August, the Hurunui District Council's Chief Executive, Hamish Dobby, recommended a fire break be built around the pile to prevent any future blazes from reaching it. He says legal action planned at that time by the Canterbury Regional Council, ECAN, against the owner of the tyres prevented his council from building the fire break.
We talked with ECAN, who were the lead agency at that time, and they said no, that they were working on the issue and they didn't want us to take that action, or they didn't want us to take any action that could potentially jeopardise the actions they were taking.
Hamish Dobby says the owner of the tyres, Michael Leroy, has been sent a number of $700 fines for letting the tyres build up, none of which have been paid. He says there's nothing more they can do.
There's a level of frustration that the pile is still there, but we also understand that ECAN are working through the law to try and resolve this issue.
So what does the Regional Council have to say? Its compliance manager, James Tricker, confirmed it had taken Michael Leroy to the Environment Court to force him to remove them. While it waits for the wheels of justice to turn, the council has decided the pile that caught fire on Monday night should now be buried.
The main contaminants we're looking at, which would be metals and hydrocarbons, travel very, very slowly through the soil. Their advice was to get it capped as soon as we could and then remove what's there as soon as we can. It's obviously hot still at the moment, so as soon as it's safe to do so, we'll be taking samples, then we'll know where we can take it for disposal.
The land that the tyres sit on is owned by Warren Hislop. His spokesperson, Angelique Hyde, says he regrets ever agreeing to let Michael Leroy store the tyres and notes he hasn't paid any rent for the site for about a year.
It's been something I've been trying to work with for the past 12 months to get it something fixed and finalised, and it hasn't been working.
Angelique Hyde says she wasn't surprised to hear the fire was deliberately lit and suspects it was done to get some action on getting the tyres removed. The police are continuing to investigate. As for when the tyres will finally be taken away, the Environment Court says the matter is likely to be heard in April. In Ototahi for Checkpoint, ko Conan Young tēnei.
Well, let's head to Wellington, where the Backbencher pub, a stone's throw from the Beehive, directly across the road really, is famed for its display of satirical political puppets, and it's got quite a cross-party unveiling in store for punters tonight. Caricatures of Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters. I can't believe they haven't had one of Winston before, they must have. Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters, the National MP Jerry Brownlee and former leader Bill English will be revealed. Our reporter Catherine Hutton is at the Backbencher and beams in now via live view. It sounds like it's going off. Catherine, what's happening?
It is. It's definitely a party atmosphere here tonight. You can probably see behind me the puppets are covered by sheets. The one behind me is Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister. She will be unveiling that in about 20 minutes' time. Now, this will be the first puppet of Jacinda. There will also be, over in the corner over there, a puppet of Winston Peters, and in the other corner, Bill English and Jerry Brownlee. Now, this is, as I said, Jacinda's first puppet, but it's actually Winston Peters' eighth puppet. Sorry, excuse me. And I can tell, sorry, someone's just walking in front of the camera. It's a bit busy here. So he's been portrayed, I can tell you, in the last incarnations as an ageing prize fighter, a boxer in his own ring, a Machiavellian prince. He's walked the plank of Jenny Shipley's ship. He's cross-dressed with Helen Clark. He's appeared immaculately dressed in his suits, and he's been the captain of his own ship. So it will be very interesting to see tonight what his latest scenario will put him as.
Yeah. What about Jacinda Ardern? What do we know about her puppet?
Well, we don't actually know terribly much. It was commissioned the day after she was made leader of the Labour Party, so actually before she was elected Prime Minister. So we're not quite sure how she's going to be portrayed. I spoke to the head of the backbencher pub. He reckons that the puppet of Jacinda is the best one he's seen so far, and he said he was simply blown away by it at 5:30 this morning. So it'll be interesting to see what it is. But we have no idea.
Yeah.
There's no peeking allowed.
Yes, no peeking allowed. The other puppets are of Bill English and Jerry Brownlee. There has to be one of Simon Bridges now. He's leader of the opposition, right?
Yes, well, I asked our listener voice about that actually. Now, basically, his approach is wait and see. He said when Phil Goff was elected leader of the Labour Party, everyone said, "Oh, you're going to do a puppet of Phil Goff," and he said no, because I don't think he's going to be there in 3 years' time. So he said the jury's still out on Simon Bridges, whether or not he will put one up, and he's going to wait and see.
God, it's brutal. The backbenches is brutal. How are the puppets made?
They're made of latex, but it's a 3-month process, and it starts actually with the cartoonist Murray Webb and Dunedin. He draws a cartoon, and then they're made by a designer in Wellington who is called Bryce Curtis. He's a film designer, and he apparently is very media shy. I won't talk to the media, but he produces all the puppets, and he's made all the puppets in this pub for the last 27 years that it's been open.
Catherine Hudden, thank you so much. Who's on camera, Catherine? Who's shooting you? Is it Bex?
Sorry?
Who's shooting? Is it Richard on camera?
It's Richard on camera, yes.
Can you
I'm having light shine in my eyes.
Yeah, can you ask Richard to do a swing around so we can see who's there? Yeah, do a swing around. We just want to see.
Can you do a swing around just to show the crowd in the pub, please?
We just want to see
who's. He's just going to do that right now.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Catherine. Lovely to talk to you. Richard has just taken his camera off the sticks, and there. Oh, here we go. There, which probably people don't necessarily want. There they are. Oh, it's mostly the august Fourth Estate waiting for the unveiling. Tony George. Tony George has been a cameraman since I was a boy. There's Hone Harawira, the puppet of. Thank you so much, everyone. Beaming in live from the backbenches on Molesworth Street. When I was in the gallery, the greatest fish and chip shop in the history of the universe used to be roughly there. And I must say I availed myself of it quite often on Molesworth Street. 2.5 minutes to 6. We're getting a lot of feedback tonight. People say that Jerry Brownlee's right and I do interview rudely and talk all the time. I thought actually I'd really worked on improving my act and was being much more reasonable and conciliatory and listening to answers, but no, you're saying I don't? Well, I'll give it a shot. Hi John, your EQC report this evening will come as no surprise to anyone from Canterbury. My favourite 2 EQC stories. A friend whose house was repainted after damage. She will forever have a record of the flowers she had in a vase that day because the painters worked around it, leaving its outline on a wall. That can't be true. Another friend who had to intervene when his elderly mother received notice of a demolition while the neighbours was to be rebuilt. The flats were upstairs and downstairs on the same building. You're just making this up, Neil. EQC, we're going to repair my cosmetically damaged West Christchurch home for $145k. Unhappy with the proposed outcome, we pushed it over cap. We're now on the home straight of a $400k repair. What the EQC Muppets would have achieved is a scary and concerning prospect. Yeah, the one we had was 50,000 originally, 600,000 settled this week. Extraordinary. It would be great, this is charter schools, it would be great if all public schools had classes of only 15 students. No wonder parents and students are keen, says Kathleen. Shouldn't all public schools have great teachers, be safe, be free and have class sizes of 15? Why should charter schools say they deserve that but not the school my children attend? Free uniforms, stationery, etc. for charter schools. There is no such thing as a free lunch. Taxpayers are paying for those items. It is a level playing field. If it is a level playing field and all students got those extras in schools, all well and good, but this is not the case. Let charter schools have to live or die like all state schools, says Louise. Thank you so much for your feedback. A lot of it tonight. Quite a few comments about the situation in EQC. If you are, sorry, in Christchurch, if you are commenting directly to us about your situation, we always get back in touch with you. And many of you do end up going on air over the following nights, although some of you don't want to deal with this in confidence. But we do appreciate hearing from us. You can text us on 2101 or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Many of you, like 3 people we had on the program tonight, want to tell your stories, but some of you don't. It all becomes part of the work we do. And we appreciate hearing from you. After 6, we're going to go to the closing of an institution. I thought it was an institution. Katrina Batten didn't. The King's Arms.
Oh, I realise that it's an institution.
Thanks, KB.
But I just haven't been there yet.
I saw Sharon Van Etten there.
Did you?
Yeah, I'm just going to sigh for a while until we see the pips, hear the pips, live from the King's Arms, the pips.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening, ko Katrina Batten aho. The government says the National Party's in no position to criticise its handling of a regional initiative under the Provincial Growth Fund. It signed off on funding for a feasibility study for Renew Energy to build a waste and energy plant on the west coast. However, RNZ has revealed a major shareholder, Gerard Gallagher, is subject to ongoing serious fraud office inquiries. The Regional Economic Development Minister, Shane Jones, has put the funding on hold while he investigates further. And he says the company received money under the previous government.
The difficulty I've got is that money has already changed hands. Up to $50,000 has already been paid to this group by Simon Bridges when he was the Minister of Economic Development.
Shane Jones. Simon Bridges says the payments were not big enough to come across his desk as a minister, and he says they were for work done in 2016 before there was any publicity about Mr Gallagher. Residents in Pukerua Bay are being warned not to use any water because their supply could be contaminated with sewage. This morning, contractors doing earthworks in the town north of Wellington broke a water and wastewater pipe. They were turned off immediately, but Wellington Water's concerned some wastewater got into the drinking supply and residents could have been drinking it for a few hours. Wellington Water's Gary O'Meara says it's treating the supply as if it's contaminated. He says it could make people sick.
And if they do start feeling unwell, they should contact their local GP. We've notified Regional Public Health, who have also advised all the local GPs in the area.
50 homes on Pukerua Beach Road, Ocean Parade Road and Brendan Beach are affected. The New Zealand Defence Force will this week begin testing a tidal area at Ngataringi Bay in the Auckland suburb of Devonport. Information released to RNZ yesterday reveals banned toxic firefighting chemicals from Devonport Naval Base have contaminated nearby waters. Devonport residents told Sophia Duckor-Jones about their concerns.
John has been living in Devonport for 60 years and says he's never held strong views about the environment until now. He says the use of the substance and the contamination is a huge worry and says it's time for the Defence Force to modernise the substances they use to fight fires. In Devonport, soils, sediments and site runoff at the shoreline at Ngataringi Bay are contaminated. Auckland Council were told about the contamination this morning and say they're waiting for more information before taking action. Ko Sophia Duckor-Jones aho.
About half of the unresolved EQC claims for the Christchurch earthquakes are for re-repairs. Information obtained by Checkpoint under the Official Information Act shows 1,273 unresolved claims are for re-repairs. Most of the other claims are callback requests, disputing repairs or cash settlements. Lawyer Peter Woods told Checkpoint he has represented about 200 cases over re-repairs. A human rights lawyer says a hearing shrouded in secrecy, which has begun in Wellington, probably involves national security. The subject of the hearing is so secret it hasn't even been listed on the court's daily schedule. Security has also been beefed up at the High Court building and the media has been excluded from the hearing. Michael Bott says even in cases involving sexual offending against children, the media is allowed to sit in, but whether the details are suppressed is a separate issue. Mr. Bott says the case is the sort of thing which happens in some of the world's worst totalitarian regimes. The Deputy Mayor of Tasman District says new environmental standards for forestry might not be enough to protect against damage from future storms. Tim King has been in Maraho near the Abel Tasman National Park assessing the damage to property from last week's storm. At least 9 properties were damaged by slips and forest debris after heavy rain from the Cyclone Gita storm. Mr King says the government-imposed rules will be tougher, but they might not be enough to prevent the type of damage incurred in Tasman.
The government has been working for the last 10 years on the National Environmental Standard for Plantation Forestry. It's due to be implemented by all councils around the country. There are going to be tougher rules around a number of things. However, I wouldn't think that even those rules and these sort of events are going to prevent some of the damage that's been created.
Tasman Deputy Mayor Tim King. Heavy machinery has been brought in to help clean up the affected properties. The Real Estate Authority has opened an investigation into the sale and flipping of an Auckland bowling club green by an unlicensed real estate agent following a checkpoint investigation on Monday. Aaron Drever sold an Avondale bowling club green to his aunt in December 2016 for $300,000, less than half its market value, and then resold it later that same day for $825,000, a $525,000 profit. It's 5 minutes past 6. Sport in New Zealand have been dismissed for a disappointing 223, batting first in the second one-day cricket international against England in Mount Maunganui. Opener Martin Guptill made 50 but received little support as England took wickets regularly and cheaply to reduce New Zealand to 108 for 6 at one stage. An unbeaten 63 of 52 balls from Mitchell Santner gave the Black Caps a modicum of respectability as he combined for a 69-run ninth wicket stand with Lockie Ferguson. The Black Caps lead the 5-match series 1-0. The majority of the New Zealand team will be in action in the first day of the World Track Cycling Championships in the Netherlands tonight. The men's and women's teams pursuit and the women's and men's team sprint are all involved in qualifying. The world champion trio of Ethan Mitchell, Sam Webster and Eddie Dawkins will defend their title in the team sprint. Mitchell says they want 2 major golds this year by winning this weekend's World Championships and April's Commonwealth Games on the Gold Coast.
For us to go in there and try, our aim is to go and try win all. I mean, we've got a strong team. We've named a really strong team, and certainly team sprint's our main focus. Yeah, I mean, we're going in there guns blazing to really try and win gold.
Ethan Mitchell. For the second consecutive tournament, New Zealand squash player Joelle King has beaten the current world champion. King is through to the final of the World Series tournament in Chicago after beating Raneem El Waleli of Egypt in the semi-finals. That's the news.
Too many chickens?
There are going to be these giant sheds, and inside there'll be 41,000 chooks in each shed.
Too many rabbits?
Even if it kills 50%, 40 to 50%, they've still left it too long because that's still a big population of rabbits left behind.
And not enough bats.
This one's a male, and so that's really cool because that shows that both sexes are here, so they could be breeding around now.
Getting the levels right. Morning Report with Guy and Espiner and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, a unique new venture capital fund for women entrepreneurs reaches a crucial stage. And after 10, the magazine that captured 60s rock and roll and turned it into an art form, Rolling Stone. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met surface weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Cloudy at times with a few showers turning to rain late tomorrow. Waikato to Manawatu, including Taupo, Taumiranui and Taihape. Areas of cloud, isolated showers possible this afternoon and again tomorrow afternoon and evening. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, partly cloudy. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Wairarapa, cloudy periods. Nelson, Bulla and Westland, rain easing to a few showers north of Hokitika tonight. Marlborough and Canterbury, scattered rain clearing this evening, then mainly fine, but areas of cloud about the coast. A few spots of rain developing late tomorrow. Otago and Southland fine at first, but scattered light rain from this evening. Fiordland, rain developing this afternoon, and for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. We began the program tonight with an Official Information Act request that revealed 48% of EQC's claims, unresolved claims, are for re-repairs. EQC told us that during 2017 they also received 8,356 callback requests for remedial damage. We're trying to clarify what the difference is between a re-repair and a callback, and we will get back to you on that once we've sorted it out. The unresolved claims for re-repairs means work has been done, but that the work was either unsatisfactory, disputed, incomplete, or had missed damage, often, as we're learning, to foundations. Lawyer Peter Woods, who represents some of these people, told us he believed this is just the tip of the iceberg. He believes thousands of homes haven't been assessed or repaired properly, and some homeowners may not even know yet that they need more work. Well, today the government appointed former Labour Cabinet Minister Dame Annette King as interim chairperson of the Earthquake Commission after the resignation of Sir Martin Weavers on Friday. Customs head Christine Stevenson has also been appointed as an independent ministerial advisor tasked with speeding up Canterbury EQC claims. Now, a short time ago, I spoke with the Minister for Greater Christchurch Regeneration, Megan Woods, and I asked her about these numbers. Does she know how many homes are effectively returning to EQC for a second, third or fourth time?
The latest information I have from EQC that 1,273 are for re-repairs, but then there's the issue for the callback request, which is now another 1,142. But one of the things that I've asked for, John, is for Treasury to go in and get me that clarity so that we can have that assessment of their liability. Treasury are the monitoring agency, so I need to make sure that I have that good forensic understanding of what these numbers mean, and one of the things that I'll be asking for in the next few weeks.
Some of these re-repairs are so big that they are going over cap, and people who start off with EQC are ending up being sent to a private insurer after 7 years. Is that good enough?
Look, and that's again one of the things that's been raised with me in the 120 odd days since I've become minister, is actually from the private insurers, is their need to be able to get information out of EQC when things go over cap so that they can get on with the repair as well. So it is concerning that this far down the track that we're still having people go over cap, over the $100,000 mark, but it's more concerning to me that when I hear that we just haven't got the information flow right to actually allow those repairs to get on and get done, because people with broken homes don't really care who's holding their file, they just want their home fixed.
Peter Woods is saying to me that as people go to sell their homes and the potential buyers send in builders to inspect them, or as they begin to wonder why their floors are sloping, more and more people who thought they'd been fixed, who thought they'd finished with EQC, are finding out they haven't. Are we going to see more and more such cases over the next few years?
And look, that's something that I am very conscious of as the responsible minister, that all the re-repairs may not have come to the fore, as Peter Woods has also said, and a number of people in Christchurch are saying, that we do need to accept that re-repairs will keep coming through, and why I want to make sure that we have the right processes in place for processing those claims as they come through.
I've spoken to a great many people from EQC over the years, and I've received assurance after assurance from Ian Simpson, for example, back after the IMBI report in 2015, that the re-repairs would be sorted and this would be put right. When is it a reasonable time frame to expect that we won't be having these conversations any longer?
Well, I've just stepped out now of my first meeting with Christine Stevenson, who's my independent ministerial advisor, a senior public service servant who's going in there to give me advice, and the interim board chair, Dame Annette King, who both I announced today. We've had our first meeting today with the CEO, Sid Miller, and I've said that's exactly what I need to know as minister. I need that kind of clarity, and I need the confidence that we're going to be able to meet those. So that's what I'm going to be asking for. In my 120 days as minister, before I took the actions I did last week, I couldn't have answered that question, and I didn't know how I was going to answer that question.
That's the Minister a short time ago. We are obviously going to keep an eye on. We're really going to try and get to the bottom of these figures. 13 minutes past 6. The Australian government has ordered its largest ever compulsory product recall. More than 2 million cars are being recalled to remove defective Takata airbags, which have been linked to more than 20 deaths worldwide and over 230 injuries. The airbags can explode, sending shrapnel into drivers and passengers. Tens of thousands of cars with airbags in New Zealand have been recalled for a free repair, but it isn't compulsory. The ABC's Stephanie Boris has the details.
If you own a Honda, BMW, Toyota, Volvo, Jeep, Lexus or Mazda, you could be driving a ticking time bomb. These cars are just a few of the brands fitted with Takata airbags.
Tragically, there's been one death and one case of serious injury in Australia as a result of the deployment of these airbags, and the government just doesn't want to see any more.
That's Assistant Minister to the Treasurer, Michael Sukkar, who's announced a compulsory recall for vehicles that have Takata airbags. It's the first of its kind in Australia. Last year, a voluntary recall was announced impacting about 2.7 million vehicles. Of those, about 1 million have had their airbags replaced. But Michael Sukkar says a compulsory recall, adding another 2.3 million cars to the list, is necessary.
This follows a recommendation from the ACCC following an extensive safety investigation. I've agreed with this recommendation because the previous voluntary recalls have not been satisfactory overall.
The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission Chair is Rod Sims.
Whether an airbag is dangerous depends completely on the age of the vehicle and the climatic conditions within which it's driven. There's a problem in the design. It lets moisture in. When the moisture gets in, the propelling mechanism can alight too quickly and cause fragments of metal to come out from the airbag.
The compulsory recall is being welcomed by the NRMA's Peter Curry.
Unfortunately, that 23 people have already lost their lives as a result of these airbags, one right here in Australia. And so for it to be elevated today to the level that it has is welcomed. This recall has been going on now for a number of years. It is clearly too long, and it is absolutely vital that we get these cars fixed.
Under the plan, all cars must have their airbags replaced by December 2020. The recall has been divided into 3 categories. The first is critical, and that's cars with alpha airbags. Rod Sims says motorists should not get behind the wheel of those vehicles because there's a 1 in 2 chance of misdeployment.
For those airbags, we're saying to people, don't drive the car again, just contact the manufacturer. They are obliged to come out and fix it.
Then there's active, which needs to be replaced as soon as possible. Those cars will be prioritised on how old they are and the climate conditions they're stored in. And the third is future. Those airbags are not yet deemed a problem, but will be. Manufacturers, dealers and importers are responsible for locating cars that have the Takata airbags. The airbag replacement is free to vehicle owners.
Takata, Stephanie Boris reporting there. 6:16. Hopes that finally there would be some relief for the people of Syria's shattered territory of Eastern Ghouta have been dashed. The first 5-hour daily ceasefire ordered by Russia broke down almost before it began, and fighting in the rebel-held enclave resumed. The so-called humanitarian pause was supposed to give civilians a window of opportunity to leave and to get much-needed aid into the area, which has been under intense bombardment for over a week. For more, here's the BBC's Jeremy Bowen.
It was supposed to be a chance to get some aid into Eastern Ghouta, but the temporary ceasefire at best was ragged. No civilians left down the newly designated safe corridors. Once again in Syria, the Russians are setting the pace. This Russian officer, stationed in the humanitarian corridor, claimed armed opposition groups were stopping civilians leaving. The day turned into a demonstration of Russian power in Syria. Their jets were in the sky, and their soldiers, alongside the Syrians, were on patrol. And they showed off clinics for displaced people. The humanitarian pause was President Putin's decision, not the UN's. He seems to have put aside the UN resolution calling for a 30-day ceasefire. The people of Eastern Ghouta are being failed by international diplomacy. Eastern Ghouta is big, about the size of Manchester, a mix of farms and concrete suburbs. The 400,000 people there have spent most of the last week in cellars. The Russian humanitarian pause won't be enough to silence critics of their military operations in Syria. The plan to suspend shelling from 9 in the morning to 2 p.m. seems to have broken down on the first day. Persuading civilians it's safe to leave will be difficult. The UN ceasefire is not close to coming into effect. It's supposed to last for 30 days right across Syria. Jihadists like Al-Qaeda are excluded, but the Russians have said that all armed opposition groups are terrorists. The ceasefire resolution has no start time at Russian insistence, and that is a fatal flaw. War is the reality in Syria. Since it started, every ceasefire has failed, and nothing suggests the latest attempt will be any different.
Jeremy Bowen with that report, and another attempt at a 5-hour ceasefire we made again in the next few hours. It is 19 and a half minutes past 6. Well, good music venues are hard to find. They've got to have a vibe. The people who go there have got to be in for a good time, but behave themselves within limits. And the King's Arms Tavern was built in the late 1800s and has been hosting the who's who of New Zealand music since the mid-1990s. It's also hosted a few big acts before they became really big, the White Stripes and the Black Keys, to name just two. I saw beautiful concerts by the Chills, Tiny Ruins. God, Tiny Ruins is so good. Camera Obscura, whose gear failed and they kind of kept on playing acoustically. The Clientele, great nights. But the site's long-time owner sold it for more than $7 million in September 2016 because the land it's on is worth, well, $7 million. And construction will soon begin on more than 100 apartments in its place. Our reporter Zach Fleming went down late this afternoon to talk to some of the King's Arms last patrons.
It's so iconic. There are people here who are actually getting King's Arms tattoos. They're immortalising the place on their body. And we're here with Craig, who's getting a King's Arms tattoo at the moment. Hey, Craig.
Hello.
Why are you getting a King's Arms tattoo, mate? Why is this so important to you?
This place is an icon, you know. I've been drinking here for nearly 28 years, I guess. Yeah, I've had so many amazing nights here.
Can you tell me about one of the amazing nights? What one springs to mind first?
Oh, I don't know if I could. I don't think I could name one over all of the others. You know, so many gigs. Beast Wars, Parquet Courts, The Business, Spelling Mistakes, The Ruts.
Is it the bands that make it special though, or is it the place?
Oh no, it's the place. I was just saying to Mark the tattoos here. It's almost got a personality of its own, you know. It's been here for so long. There's so many people have had so many good times here and important times in their life, you know, weddings and what have you. It's almost got a personality of its own, this place. Yeah.
And how do you feel about it closing down?
It's a shame, man. It's really, yeah, it is. It's such a shame. Auckland live music culture is dying, you know, and this is just another nail in the coffin. It's a real shame.
This has been a massive part of my life growing up, and yeah, been to a lot of amazing gigs here. His dad's played on the stage, no one you've ever heard of, a couple of times, yeah. So no, it's really sad to see it go, because I was a punk and rock and metal kid, and there aren't many places to go in this city for that, especially now. So yeah, it's a real loss, and it's a loss of a small venue with a great sound system that attracts international bands. Where are they going to go now?
We remember, like, as kids, you know, sitting at the bar and swinging our legs and drinking like raspberry lemonade, and so yeah, we've been coming here since we were tiny.
We're in a band, used to be in bands in the late 90s, and we played here in the King's Arms when there was no stage, so it was playing on the floor. So that's how long we've known this place. So 90s through to now, that's nearly 20 years, I suppose.
There's lots about the King's Arms that, you know, we've had lots of kind of personal relationships with. Yes, the music, things like weddings, you know, it's been really great.
It's like a pub and music venue built on its memories, right?
Yeah.
And there's not many of those in Auckland with the amount of memories that are in this place, right?
Like Glue Pot gone, Java Jive gone, you know, King's Arms gone, everything's, you know. But, you know, it's a change, isn't it? The demographic changes. Electronica changed everything, the DJ crowd changed everything, so this started to get left behind. I mean, the last time we played here was 2 weeks ago, and we played just in the small front bar, and that was a nice little party crowd, you know. It wasn't being filled anymore, this big space. So, you know, as much as people were getting sad, people actually weren't turning up here anymore.
I mean, how many places are like this left in Auckland? Like a real true live music venue where you can just kind of, you know, where it's not a pretty place, it's just a come and be yourself kind of, you hang out, yeah. There's going to be a lot of a lot of tears and stuff, I think, tonight. It's going to be a sad night.
Zach Fleming at the Kings, talking to people for whom it means a great deal as the best music venues do, shot by our wonderful cameraman Nick Monroe. The iconic Tidy Kiwi anti-litter campaign of the 1970s and 80s is making a comeback. The government's given just over $3 million in funding to resurrect the Keep New Zealand Beautiful campaign in a bid to try to help kids tackle the soaring amount of waste. Our reporter, Nita Blake-Person, and cameraman, Dan Cook, went to an Auckland classroom today for a bit of a test run.
It's been 30 years since nationwide campaigns rolled out asking New Zealanders to do the right thing by putting their rubbish in the bin. But at Rugby School near Clevedon, the next generation of tidy Kiwis are learning the ropes. Kiki the Kiwi and his litter critter friends are the face of the campaign this time around. They're spreading the word that rubbish is clogging our beaches, parks and waterways. And the pupils are getting the message loud and clear.
Whenever you're at a park or something, you should pick up a couple of pieces of rubbish. Always put rubbish in the bin or in your lunch boxes. My grandpa, when he goes to the beach, he always takes a rubbish bag and then picks up rubbish.
The chief executive of Keep New Zealand Beautiful, Heather Saunderson, says 2 years ago volunteers collected 120,000 tonnes of rubbish from the streets of New Zealand over a 12-month period.
That's a lot of litter. That was enough to fill 120 rugby fields half a metre high with rubbish.
Which prompted them to spring back into action.
Education is probably something that's been lacking over many years too, so people might not necessarily know what is recyclable or what isn't, and that varies from place to place. So what you can do in Auckland isn't necessarily what you can recycle in Queenstown. So that's part of our role, is to better educate people about recycling and composting and generally how to reduce their waste.
Heather Saunderson says New Zealand's clean green image is on the line and tourists are a key part of the campaign.
I think if you have a tarnished image, that obviously can affect the economics of a country. So it is imperative for New Zealand and the tourism sector that we do maintain this clean green image. At the same time, we do need to focus on the tourism demographic and make sure that they're educated on how clean and green that we are, so that they're not adding to a problem.
But Paul Evans of the waste and recycling group Waste Min says dealing with litter is only part of tackling New Zealand's waste problems. He says a lot's changed since the Tidy Kiwi campaigns of yesteryear.
In particular, we have a lot more disposable products of a different nature, which actually do create more waste and do create more litter. And so I think, Be Tidy Kiwi and Keep New Zealand Beautiful, they're iconic things. They're things that I still remember from when I was a kid. And so I think refocusing consumers on that, what people do, the part that they can play in that is really, really important.
New Zealanders generate some of the highest levels of waste in the developed world, around 730 kilograms each per year. Mr Evans says up to half of our curbside waste could be recycled or composted, and waste going to landfills has gone up by around 30% over the past 7 years.
We're probably, 5 to 10 years behind countries in Europe, and so, we're a country that has amazing natural capital, and so simply put, we need to do better. We need to catch up. We need leadership from government, we need leadership from cities, and we need leadership from the business sector as well.
The funding will also allow Keep New Zealand Beautiful to carry out a nationwide litter audit with the aim of influencing local and central government policies around dealing with waste. The Associate Environment Minister Eugenie Sage has also launched a review of the Waste Minimisation Act, which will look at businesses having to take responsibility for products once they're used and hiking landfill costs. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Nita Blake-Person, aho.
6:27, lots of feedback coming in from Christchurch tonight, and we're going to give you a sample of it. We're also going to bring in a live shot from the Backbencher pub on Molesworth Street, across the road from the old Parliament buildings, opposite the Beehive and the old Parliament buildings. And I think the unveiling, so there is Jacinda Ardern, who is, I think, about to unveil the puppet of herself. So we'll just read out the feedback. If you're watching, she's cutting some cake. She's cutting a little bit of, I don't know why she's cutting cake. But she is, ladies and gentlemen, and the puppet of her is still covered in a big white curtain or something behind her. It looks like she's about to pull it down. Hopefully it'll happen in the next 1 minute and 45 seconds while we're on air. Whilst we're waiting for that to happen, the only way EQC will resolve its liabilities There it is. So it's just, so the curtain has just come off, and there she is wearing what looks like leisure wear, DJing. I think this is probably her laneway set from a couple of years ago. One hand on the headphones she's holding up to her left ear. Her teeth are prominent, almost cruelly prominent. But that is the nature of the puppets at Backbench. Let's see if we can hear her speak.
It's an honour to be here, and it's an honour really to be part of such an enormous backbench tradition.
She's saying it's an honour to be here if you can't hear. She's being a very good sport. She's got her track gear on, her leisure suit, and she is DJing in a fairly prominent position. Such are the joys of being a Prime Minister, your very own caricature in the Backbencher pub. She's smiling broadly and is a very good sport, but some of them are almost a little bit mean. However, she is grinning from ear to ear, and the crowd seem to be hugely enjoying it. That's it from the Backbencher pub, where the Jacinda Ardern puppet has been unveiled. I think Bill English and Jerry Brownlee are also getting theirs. Bill English, of course, leaving Parliament this week. His valedictory, I think, on Thursday. We will cover that as it happens. Thank you for being with us tonight. We really appreciate your company, and we hope you have a fantastic evening on behalf of our really great Checkpoint team. We'll be back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The government's hit back at criticism of its handling of a prospective waste-to-energy plant on the west coast. Contractors working in Pukerua Bay break pipes leading to possible sewage contamination of the drinking supply. Defence is to start testing tidal waters in Devonport for banned toxic firefighting chemicals. Considerably more than 1,000 or half of all unresolved claims from Christchurch earthquakes are for re-repairs, and an investigation into the sale of an Auckland bowling club green and its resale later the same day for a $500,000 profit. Our next news and weather is at 7.
You might think of Harold Arlen as the composer of the songs from The Wizard of Oz, but he came up with a whole lot more besides. Stormy weather, it's only a paper moon, come rain or